for joining me. My name is Grim, and this is your new haven for all things horror. And today, I'm going to be reviewing the movie Last Night in Soho. And Last Night in Soho is a visually pleasing horror mystery that stars Thomasin McKensie as Ellie, an aspiring fashion designer who moves to London for school, but she starts to experience weird dreams of 1960s London and a dazzling wannabe dancer named Sandy, played by Anya Taylor-Joy. Ellie soon realizes the glamour is not all it appears to be, and the dreams of the past start to crack and splinter into something much darker. This movie is also directed by Edgar Wright, who directed both Baby Driver and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, which are both very different from this sort of movie. But I first want to say how I really love the cinematography in this movie. Just how they shot the scenes in the 60s. It truly felt like a magical time to be in until it didn't. The whole aesthetic and style just seemed like the type of time you'd want to be in. There were also many scenes with when Anya and Thomasin were on screen together where you just see the messaging in this movie when having these two women carry the movie, and also sometimes they mirror each other in some parts. It just adds to that artistic feel that this movie also gives off, and it's both just powerful and shows the depth of this movie and the subject it's about. The horror elements in this movie were captured very well when it came to Ellie hallucinating these spirits and trying to piece this mystery together, and little by little the mystery gets put together until the end when the twist is finally revealed. It is honestly just so satisfying. Now, my only nitpick about this movie is the first act does take some time to get going, and it kind of drags as we see Ellie get to the college and experience London in current time. Because at the beginning is when she gets to the college and starts to meet her other students and all that, and settles into London. So it kind of the movie takes a little to start going around that point. But with that being said, Last Night in Soho is still a great mystery with very real and deep themes and subjects, and I feel like this movie elevates them with the horror and this psychological thriller aspect to the story that will just keep you engaged. So that was my non-spoiler part of the video. Now I'm about to get into the full spoilers, talk about the movie in depth. So if you haven't seen this movie yet, I recommend go watching and come back to this video and hearing my thoughts on this movie in full context. So spoilers are starting right now. So Eloise Ellie Turner is a sweet and naive teenager with troubled mental health, and she loves the music of the swinging 60s and dreams of becoming a fashion designer. We learn her mother, also a fashion designer, killed herself when Ellie was 7. So she was raised by her maternal grandmother. We learn that Ellie occasionally sees her mother's ghost in mirrors, which her grandmother is also aware of. After receiving the acceptance letter to this college, Ellie packs and moves from Redruth, Cornwall to London to study at the London College of Fashion, where she struggles to fit in, especially with her bullying roommate Jocasta. In which I will just say Jocasta just has no chill at all. Honestly, she was just so ruthless for no reason. That's when Ellie meets John, another student, basically the only one that is kind to her at this school. With how unhappy she is in her dorm, she moves into a bedsit owned by an old lady by the name of Miss Collins. So this is after she gets to college. She moves into this bedsit, and basically this is where the second act really starts. Because the first act is basically just her getting to college and basically figuring out she doesn't like her dorm situation, so she decides to move into this bedsit. And this is where this movie really starts to get you invested into that horror aspect that it has. Now, in the first night staying there, Ellie has a vivid dream where she is transported to the 1960s and observes a confident young lady by the name of Sandy, played by Anya Taylor-Joy, in a nightclub called Café de Paris. Sandy inquires about becoming a singer at the club before starting a relationship with a charming manager named Jack. And the next morning, Ellie designs a dress inspired by Sandy and discovers a mysterious hickey on her neck that Jack gave Sandy during the dream. So basically, the first mysterious thing that happens, she has this dream, Sandy, Jack meeting, they go back to Sandy's place, Jack gives her a hickey, and Ellie wakes up with the same one. So that in itself was a little strange. It's like a little puzzle piece to get you invested, and you're like, okay, that's really interesting, and it kind of just pulls you into the story. And so that night, Ellie has another dream where Sandy auditions at Soho nightclub, which is arranged by Jack, Jack before returning to the same bedsit that Ellie has rented. So this is where we figure out that Sandy stayed at the same bedsit that Ellie is staying at. And so that's connecting some pieces right there. And inspired by these visions that Ellie is having, she dyes her hair blonde and changes her fashion style to match Sandy's. And she also gets a job at a pub to pay for the bedsit in this new changing character. Ellie is then observed by an older man who recognizes her similarities to Sandy. And throughout the movie, Ellie discovers and further dreams that Sandy isn't living the life she had hoped for, as she's made a backup dancer and is overly sexualized in these dances and in these shows that Jack has made her a part of. And to go even further, it is revealed that Sandy is being pimped by Jack to his male business associates. Trigger warning for anyone sensitive to these topics. But like, this is where the movie really starts to get interesting, and it really starts to get like serious, and you feel like a deep empathy for Sandy and like what this story is truly about. And I think that's why I feel like this movie will eventually become a cult classic, because right now I don't really see a lot of people talking about this movie in the horror community. Like, they probably did back in 2021, but I don't hear anyone talking about this movie, and that's just crazy to me because of how important this movie seems to be in the story revolving around it. I feel like this movie should be praised more or talked about a lot more because of the subjects that it talks about with like trying to be famous and what the standards were for a woman to make it in terms of Hollywood and getting casted in productions. As Ellie is awake in current time, she starts to see menacing silhouettes that resemble Jack and the men who exploited and used Sandy, making Ellie feel increasingly disturbed. After inviting John back to her bedsit, Ellie has a vision of Jack murdering Sandy, and so the next day she decides to track down the older man who she believes is Jack. And so yeah, we're led to believe that this guy who looks like Jack, who seems to be Jack, Ellie starts to get suspicious of him, and this movie starts to get even more into the horror aspect with these silhouettes, these apparitions of the men and Jack, and they just feel threatening. And like it really, during your first screening of this movie, this was my second or third time watching this movie, by the way, because I have it on 4K. And just, you still get those feelings of that danger that Ellie is in. And that scene in itself was just played out so well. And seeing like how it was executed and the way it was shot, how we were able to see what Ellie was seeing in her reaction to it, it was just shot so well, and I don't get how this movie is overlooked, because just of how touching it kind of is. So after that night, Ellie goes to the police, but isn't taken seriously, though the female officer expresses concern for Ellie's well-being and mental health. So after failing to get help from the police, Ellie goes to the library to search newspaper reports of Sandy's murder from the 1960s, but instead starts to see visions and apparitions of the men even more, leading to her to almost stab Jocasta. And so she's starting to like really see mental hallucinate more, and we don't really get to learn a lot about these abilities that Ellie has. Like, is she a medium? Is she an empath? Is she schizophrenic? Is there something more to that? I don't think she'd be schizophrenic, because it seems like it just doesn't seem like that, but more like she's an empath or a medium or something along those lines. But as far as that, we didn't really get to see much more into that. So I feel like that's an interesting thing that I still wonder about. But during her research, she doesn't find reports of Sandy's murder, but instead she finds reports of local men who vanished without a trace, making her now believe she must avenge Sandy. Now she's on a mission to avenge Sandy's death. And so Ellie confronts the old man, and he denies killing Sandy. And before leaving the pub, he's angry, and he says one last thing to Ellie before getting struck by a taxi, and is killed right in front of Ellie. And this is like one of the jump scares in this movie that got me, because it's just so unexpected, and like you're just so into the movie, and so it's like, then next thing you know, he gets like sideswiped by a freaking taxi. You're just like, oh my god. And it's like, it's a little graphic too, with like the blood and all that. And it was just executed so freaking well. And so a little bit after the old man gets killed by the taxi, Ellie's boss reveals that the man's name was actually Lindsay, not Jack, and that Lindsay was an undercover vice officer who tried to encourage Sandy to escape her life of prostitution, which Ellie then recalls meeting Lindsay in her visions, in her dreams. Ellie then starts to panic, and she goes back to the bedsit and informs Miss Collins that she is leaving London because she's just so overwhelmed with what just happened to the old man and just these visions that she's getting. And then Miss Collins invites Ellie into her place to try and calm her down before telling Ellie that a nice police lady had stopped by to check in on Ellie. Now this is when things start to get really interesting, and I'm just full into this. I'm like, oh, wait, what's happening? What's going on? Miss Collins reveals that she is in fact Sandy, and then the camera pans down to a piece of mail on her coffee table, and it reads, "To Alexandra Collins." And we learned earlier in the movie that Alex was Sandy's pseudonym for the work that she did for Jack. It is revealed that Ellie's visions were not of Jack killing Sandy. Instead, it was Sandy killing Jack when he threatened her with a knife. After that point, Sandy would then lure the men she was pimping to back to her room and kill them and hide their bodies in the walls and floorboards of the apartment. So that explains why almost every night Ellie would get these dreams or visions of what happened, because I'm guessing the spirits of these men were feeding it to Ellie and were trying to seek help from her even after what they did. Ellie then learns that she's been drugged by Miss Collins with the intention of killing her to ensure her silence. Ellie and Miss Collins then get into a scuffle. Ellie knocks over an ashtray and starts a fire. And that's when John comes to Ellie's aid, barging into the place, only to be stabbed by Miss Collins. And I'm just like, what? Like, John comes in to save the day, next thing you know, he just gets stabbed in the stomach, like, oh my god. And then Miss Collins, she continues after Ellie, who hallucinates ascending up a glass staircase as she's climbing the stairs. And she sees Miss Collins as Sandy, so when she looks at Miss Collins, she's not Miss Collins, she's in fact Anya Taylor-Joy's Sandy. Ellie then kicks Miss Collins, sending her down the stairs, and Ellie flees to her room, where the spirits of Sandy's victims plead with Ellie to avenge them, but Ellie refuses. Some can only guess why. Miss Collins then barges in, where she also sees the spirits of Jack and the numerous men that she had killed. As the police arrive, Sandy attempts suicide, but is stopped by Ellie, showing that Ellie understands why she did what she did. And at this point, this is where the story in the movie really goes deep and like really shows like the power and like the effect this kind of story has. And like you just feel, you honestly, from Ellie and from Anya Taylor-Joy and like the scene in general, you can feel the empathy for Miss Collins and like the pain that she went through and why she did what she did. Like, not justifying what she did and not justifying what the men did, but like basically you can see why you don't feel bad for the men. You feel bad for Sandy, for Alexandra Collins. You feel bad for that person. And like there's this one line about how those men killed Sandy and they created Alexandra Collins. And that line in itself was like, you could really feel the depth in that, which is what I really love about this movie. How deep it goes into the story and like really getting onto these topics that are so horrifying to talk about and disturbing and uncomfortable, but when it's done in such a way to where the horror aspects like that are in this movie elevate the story into an entertaining but meaningful like movie. I feel like it can be executed so well and be told in such a way to where it's not over the top like triggering, but in a way to where you can have fun with it, but you can also relate to it. Sandy then tells Ellie to save John and herself, remaining in the building as it burns. And like I said, during the scene, you can just feel the pain that Miss Collins has, and like you can feel the pain that Ellie has, and like this ending scene, it just feels so heavy, and you just understand why after watching. We then skip to Ellie enjoying success as her designs are showcased at her end of year fashion show and is congratulated by her grandmother and John. Ellie sees her mother in a vision of Sandy in a mirror. Her mother smiles at her, and Sandy blows a kiss before the credits start to roll. And yeah, basically that's Last Night in Soho for you. I really did enjoy this movie, and it's one of those movies that you might not watch a lot, but like at some point you'll just think about it and you'll be like, you know what, I won't watch the movie again. I feel like this is one of those movies that are going to be overlooked, underrated, definitely not talked about enough. And so that's why I'm talking about right now, because I want to put it on y'all's radar and really give this movie a shot, because I feel like a lot of people, especially people who are getting into the industry, like with acting, the movie business and all. I feel like this would be a really good watch for them. But overall, this movie was fun. It definitely had its horror elements. It had a great story, really powerful stuff. So with all this being said, I give this movie a A-. So yeah, I hope y'all did enjoy. Let me know what y'all thought about this movie down below. Did you like it? Did you not like it? I would really like to hear your thoughts down below. Also, if you like this video, don't forget to like, subscribe if you are new, and join the Grimpire. I plan to try and post every week, once a week, maybe even twice a week, depending on how fast I can edit and get videos out. But I'm trying for y'all. Also, while on the topic, please share some feedback down below. I would really like to hear your thoughts on some things I can work on, some things I can do better. I just recently got Adobe Photoshop, so I can make better thumbnails. So yeah, all my socials are down in the description below. I have my Twitter down there, my Snap, my Instagram. Mostly active on Twitter though, so I really recommend following me there, because I will also be posting when I do post. I will also be tweeting out when I do post a video. But if you turn post notifications on, you should also get those as well. And if this movie seems to interest you, check Last Night in Soho out now.